go ahead and first of all talk about what is literary theory. The literary theory in a strict sense is a systematic study of the nature of literature and of the methods for analyzing literature. So basically just let's understand it. What is literary theory? It's just a systematic study of nature of literature or how to analyze a literature. Literature or literary theory has changed the way we think about literature, language, identity, and society. So basically, these are different colored goggles through which we look at the society, or maybe to look at the text, art, painting, everything. Literary theory, sometimes designated as critical theory or just theory, and now undergoing a transformation into cultural theory. Within the discipline of literary studies can be understood as the set of concepts and intellectual assumptions on which rests the work of explaining or interpreting literary text. So basically literary theories can be synonymously used as critical theory or just theory or cultural theory, but all the purpose of entire this literary theory or just theory is to interpret text, interpret art, culture, everything. One of the fundamental questions of literary theory is what is literature? Although many contemporary theorists and literary scholars believe either that literature cannot be defined or that it can refer to any use of a language. Specific theories are distinguished not only by their methods and conclusions, but even by how they create meaning in a text. However, some theorists acknowledge that these texts do not have a singular fixed meaning which is deemed correct. And this is very much interesting because when we this reminds us about reader response theory or criticism, but it's not only one theory, but some theorists acknowledge that these texts do not have singular fixed meaning which is deemed correct, and that's very much it, because if we all being maybe just students of literature, if we all watch a single movie, then our perception about those characters, that's the story or plot or everything that we witness, is not same. Or even if just consider that with 10 people, 10 students, or maybe 10 friends, we just go out and witness an accident. When we go back to our home and we narrate the same incident to our friends, or maybe sister, brother, family members, or anybody, our 10 different perspectives will be completely different. I would say that it was a casual accident and there was nothing. Or maybe someone will say, it was the horrible accident or something like that. It means looking at the same thing, we all have our different perspective, and that's what literary theory is about. There are many theories which provide us a different kind of colored goggles, colored or maybe angles, and we look at the text from those angles. In the following series, I told you in the beginning that this will be the entire series of lectures on literary theories, and in this entire series or video series, what I'm going to talk about, or maybe all are the topics I'm going to make videos about: traditional literary criticism, new criticism, practical criticism, liberal humanism, Marxist criticism, formalism, structuralism, poststructuralism, deconstruction, postmodernism, new historicism, and cultural materialism, reader response theory, psychoanalytic criticism, feminist criticism, queer theory, postcolonial criticism, subaltern studies, cultural studies, ecocriticism, ecofeminism, phenomenological criticism, metacriticism, cyber criticism, and some of my friends also suggested me to include translation studies as well as digital humanities. But what I believe is rather they are not theories, but they are different subjects. Digital humanities nowadays is coming as the big umbrella subjects, and under which there are many other things. So maybe yes, definitely I'll make another video about digital humanities and the separate one for the translation studies. But I believe that in literary theories, these are the things that I'm going to talk about. And if you really want to include me some more, because I just acknowledged that translation studies and digital humanities was actually suggested to me, but I thought that maybe I can make a separate video, not in this series. So in the beginning, we are going to talk about traditional literary criticism. What is traditional literary criticism? Literary criticism is the term given to studies that define, classify, analyze, interpret, and evaluate works of literature. Literary criticism or literary studies is the study, evaluation, interpretation of literature. Modern literary criticism is often influenced by literary theory, which is the philosophical discussion of literature's goals and methods. Traditional literary criticism includes classical and medieval criticism, Renaissance criticism, Enlightenment criticism, 19th century Romantic criticism, and we are going to talk about all these in the separate video which I am going to make in the series. And next we are going to talk about liberal humanism. Liberal humanism refers to a set of values and attitudes of the relationship of individual to the outside world. Many of the concepts that seem fundamental to human existence that emerge from enlightenment are expressions of what has come to be known as liberal humanism. So this is just a simple definition of liberal humanism. You may pause this video if you want to write it down, or maybe if you just we're going to go into detail about liberal humanism and all these theories in the separate lectures. We're going to talk about formalism and its definition in short. Formalism is a school of literary criticism and literary theory having mainly to do with structural purposes of a particular text. It is the study of a text without taking into account any outside influences. So it's basically a study of form. Formalism rejects notions of culture or social influence, authorship and content, and instead focuses on modes, genres, discourses and forms. Structuralism may be defined as the project of giving literary criticism the theoretical rigor of a science of a language. The attempt to rethink everything through once again in terms of linguistics. Its historical origins are in Russian formalist criticism, and the linguistics of Saussure. So we definitely are going to go into details of all these terms and everything in structuralism in the separate video. Just for the sake of just definition, it's I think more than enough. Poststructuralism. In the post-structuralist approach to textual analysis, the reader replaces the author as the primary subject of inquiry, and without a central fixation on the author, post-structuralists examine other sources of meaning, for example, readers, cultural norms, other literatures, etc. Which are therefore never authoritative and promise no consistency. A reader's culture and society then share at least an equal part in the interpretation of a piece to the cultural and social circumstances of the author. So in post-structuralism or in post-structuralist criticism, author is not so important, but the other things, maybe the readers and cultural norms, other literatures and the external things, in short, context is more important than the text itself. The next theory is deconstruction, about which many people discuss many things, and it's complex, but let's try to understand it. It's not that complex actually. Derrida's approach consists in including readings of a text with an air to what runs counter to the structural unity of intended sense of a particular text. The purpose is to expose that the object of a language and that which any text is founded upon is irreducibly complex, unstable, or impossible. What he says is that any text is created through the medium of a language, and language itself is irreducibly complex, unstable, and impossible. So the meaning which is conveyed through a language, but language doesn't have a definite meaning. Then how do we have a meaning of the text which is conveyed through a language? That's his question. Throughout his readings, Derrida hoped to show deconstruction at work. That is, the ways that this originary complexity works its structuring and destructuring effects. Postmodernism. The term postmodernism has been applied both to the era following modernity and to a host of movements within that era, mainly in art, music, and literature, that reacted against tendencies in modernism. Postmodernism includes skeptical, critical interpretations of culture, literature, art, philosophy, history, linguistics, economics, architecture, fiction, feminist theory, literary criticism, and so on and so forth. Postmodernism is often associated with schools of thought such as deconstruction and poststructuralism, as well as philosophers such as Lyotard, Derrida, and Jameson, etc. Reader response theory, a theory which gained prominence in the late 1960s. that focuses on the reader's or audience's reaction to a particular text, perhaps more than the text itself. Reader response criticism can be connected to post-structuralism's emphasis on the role of the reader in actively constructing text rather than passively consuming them. Unlike text-based approaches such as new criticism, which are grounded upon some objective meaning already present in the work being examined, reader response criticism argues that a text has no meaning before a reader experiences or reads it. So basic difference between new criticism and reader response criticism is that new criticism says that there is an objective meaning already in the text. Reader response criticism rejects that idea and says there is no meaning to the text until and unless any reader experiences or reads it. So it depends on the reader. The meaning depends on the reader in reader response theory, and in new criticism it is already there. If you read it, it's there. If you don't read it, but still there is a meaning in the text. The reader response critic's job is to examine the scope and variety of readers' reactions and analyze the ways in which different readers, sometimes called interpretive communities, make meaning out of both purely personal reactions and inherited or culturally conditioned ways of reading. Next theory is psychoanalytic criticism. The object of psychoanalytic literary criticism at its very simplest can be the psychoanalysis of the author or of a particular interesting character in a given work. The criticism is similar to psychoanalysis itself, closely following the analytic interpretive process discussed in Freud's interpretation of dreams and other works. Critics may view the fictional characters as a psychological case studies attempting to identify such Freudian concepts as Oedipus complex, Freudian slips, id, ego and superego and so on, and demonstrate how they influence the thoughts and behaviors of the fictional character. Feminist criticism. Feminist literary criticism is literary criticism informed by feminist theory, or more broadly by the politics of feminism. It uses feminist principles and ideology to critique the language of literature. This school of thought seeks to analyze and describe the ways in which literature portrays the narrative of male domination by exploring the economic, social, political, and psychological phases embedded within literature. Or maybe in short, we can say just feminist criticism or feminism is way of looking at literature from women's perspective, women's point of view. Queer theory. Queer theory focuses on mismatches between sex, gender, and desire. Queer theory focuses on mismatches between sex, gender, and desire. Queerness has been associated most prominently with bisexual, lesbian, and gay subjects, but its analytical framework also includes such topics as cross-dressing, intersex bodies and identities, gender ambiguity and gender corrective surgery, etc. Marxist criticism. Marxist literary criticism is a loose term describing literary criticism based on a socialist and dialectic theories. Marxist criticism views literary works as a reflection of the social institutions from which they originate. According to Marxists, even literature itself is a social institution and has a specific ideological function based on the background and the ideology of the author. The simplest goals of Marxist literary criticism can include an assessment of the political tendency of a literary work, determining whether its social content or its literary form are progressive. It also includes analyzing the class constructs demonstrated in the literature. New Historicism and Cultural Materialism. The New Historicism is a form of literary theory whose goal is to understand intellectual history through literature and literature through its cultural context, which follows the 1950s field of history of ideas and refers to itself as a form of cultural poetics. It was first developed in 1980s, primarily through the work of the critic Stefan Greenblatt, and gained widespread influence in the 90s. Cultural materialism in literary theory and cultural studies traces its origin to the works of the left-wing literary critic Raymond Williams. Cultural materialism makes analysis based in critical theory in the tradition of a Frankfurt School. It emerged as a theoretical movement in the early 1980s, along with New Historicism, an American approach to early modern literature, with which it shares much common ground. The term was coined by Williams, who used it to describe a theoretical blending of leftist culturalism and Marxist analysis. Cultural materialists deal with specific historical documents and attempt to analyze and recreate the zeitgeist of a particular moment in history. Postcolonialism or postcolonial studies is an academic discipline that analyzes, explains, and responds to the cultural legacy of colonialism and structural extraction of imperialism. Postcolonialism speaks about the human consequences of external control and economic exploitation of native people and their lands. Drawing from postmodern schools of thought, postcolonial studies analyze the politics of knowledge by examining the functional relations of social and political power that sustain colonialism and neocolonialism, the imperial regime's depiction of the colonizer and the colonized. Postcolonial theory looks at issues of power, economics, politics, religion, and culture, and how these elements work in relation to colonial hegemony. Cultural studies. Cultural studies is an interdisciplinary field of studies, which means that it draws from many different subject areas, including sociology, anthropology, political science, and history, although it is sometimes misunderstood as being the study of a popular culture. Cultural studies is, in fact, the study of ways in which culture is constructed and organized, and the ways in which it evolves and changes over time. The field of cultural studies emerged from Birmingham Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies in the UK, which beginning in 1968 was headed by Stuart Hall. While there were many scholars who contributed important work to the field during its infancy, Hall's pioneering work put cultural studies on the map, and he is generally accepted as the discipline's most important figure. Ecocriticism is the study of literature and the environment from an interdisciplinary point of view, where literature scholars analyze texts that illustrate environmental concerns and examine the various ways literature treats the subject of nature. Some eco-critics brainstorm possible solutions for the correction of the contemporary environmental situations, though not all eco-critics agree on the purpose, methodology, or scope of eco-criticism. Eco-criticism is an intentionally broad approach that is known by a number of other designations, including green culture or green studies, eco-poetics, and environmental literary criticism, and is often informed by other fields such as ecology, sustainable design, biopolitics, environmental history, environmentalism, and social ecology, among other fields. Ecofeminism. Ecofeminism is a term that links feminism with ecology. It advocates say that paternalistic or capitalistic society has led to harmful split between nature and culture. Early ecofeminists propagated that the split can only be headed by a feminine instinct of nature and holistic knowledge of nature's processes. Modern ecofeminism or feminist eco-criticism eschews such essentialism and instead focuses more on intersectional questions such as how the nature-culture split enables the operation of female and non-human bodies. It is also an activist and academic movement that sees critical connections between the exploitation of nature and the domination over women, both caused by men. Subaltern Studies. Subaltern Studies emerged around 1982 as a series of journal articles published by Oxford University Press in India. A group of Indian scholars trained in the West wanted to reclaim their history. Its main goal was to retake history for the underclasses, for the voices that had not been heard previously. Scholars of the subaltern hoped to break away from the histories of the elites and the Eurocentric bias of a current imperial history. In the main, they wrote against the Cambridge School, which seemed to uphold the colonial legacy, that is, it was elite-centered. Instead, they focused on subaltern in terms of class, caste, caste, gender, race, language, and culture. They espoused the idea that there may have been political dominance, but that this was not hegemony. The primary leader was Ranjit Guha, who had written works on peasant uprising in India. Another of the leading scholars of Subaltern Studies is Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. She draws on a number of theoretical positions in her analysis of Indian history, deconstruction, Marxism, feminism, etc. She was highly critical of the current histories of India that were told from the vantage point of the colonizers and presented a story of the colony via British administrators. Phenomenological criticism. Phenomenology inspects the text without presuppositions about ontology or epistemology. It finds reality in the physical realm of awareness. To accomplish the analysis of the object as it registers in the consciousness, the phenomenologist suspends all presuppositions, inferences, or judgments about the objects outside the consciousness. Phenomenological criticism sees the work of art as an aesthetic work, existing only in the mind of the perceiver. They tend to have little interest in the ontology of the aesthetic object, a major concern of the new critics, and instead value the effective aspects of the work. Metacriticism. Criticism is the short definition of metacriticism. Criticism of criticism, that is the examination of the principles, methods, terms of criticism, either in general as in critical theory or in the study of particular critics or critical debates. The term usually implies a consideration of the principles underlying critical interpretation and judgment. Cybercriticism, an emerging field of study devoted to the understanding of cyberculture, that is, the culture which has developed from the technological developments of the late 20th century. In particular, those associated with the computer and the networks facilitated by the internet. The key concern of cybercriticism is to recognize the rapidly changing and dynamic interaction between biological entities, that is human beings, and machines, with all the profound consequences of constituting identity that this implies. Such concerns have occupied science fiction writers most evidently, but the wider theoretical issues raised by cybercritics may be seen to chime with the tendencies of postmodernism. More generally, the virtual space generated by the networked system opens up the possibility of multiple non-linear connections between texts and subjects. And finally, we are here, list of books for literary theory. While preparing this lecture and the following lectures, I'm reading these books, and I would recommend you to do the same, because if you are preparing for NET and SET examination, and or maybe if you are doing research or PhD on any of the literary theories, I believe that these books are very much basic. You must have them and you must study them. I'll put link in the description below to purchase all these books. You just click on the book and you can purchase it from Amazon. And finally, questions. If you have questions, do post them in the comments below, or there is another way. You can just go through any of my social media accounts and post your questions or even suggestions there. Post them in the comments below, or you can ask me directly on any of these social media accounts. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that like button, and if you really didn't like anything about it, then in the comments below let me know what are the things that I must improve in the future videos. And if you don't want to miss any of such lectures or any of such videos in the future, then subscribe to this channel, share this video with your friends or colleagues, or maybe in the group somewhere. See you next week with another new video.